Good evening. Welcome to our Municipal Council of Wednesday, October 16th, 2019. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, Mr. Lamanna, will you be introducing item C for us, please?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll introduce the items C1 and C2. I think we're going to deal with them together. And it's council recognizing our Gilles for heroic efforts on September 15th at the sports complex that saved a human life. And certainly also council's recognizing Ms. McCallen for the assistance provided as well on September 15th in saving that human life. And I believe Acting Chief Menzies has some additional words.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor and members of council. It's with pleasure that I introduce to you two true first responders. These two young ladies, when they were required to, acted and made an impact on our community and certainly on the life of one gentleman. I'd like to introduce Rachel Gilles and Michelle McCallen. Come on up, Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Gilles, and as you've probably heard, I performed CPR on George on September 15th around 11:40 a.m. at the complex. It was a regular Sunday morning for me and my dad. I was scorekeeping the game. The play was in George's end at this time, and the puck came around the boards. As the play formed, George was laying face down on the ice, and I took a quick glance over and I saw him. The play stopped and everyone circled around him, all of the players. I walked onto the ice from the scorekeeper's box and took a knee right beside his head. I heard snoring, but I didn't feel a pulse on his throat or his wrist. It sounded like sleep apnea, which is little to no breathing from the human body. I immediately started to take off his jersey and his chest protector. I had my dad take off his blocker and catcher with his in pads, and there was two people taking off his skates and rubbing his feet to get the blood flow back. I started chest compressions as soon as I had an empty chest to use, and then Michelle passed the AED to me, and I passed I had it right beside me, and I put the paddles on right where they should be and delivered one shock. As soon as the AED told me to go back to chest compressions, that's what I did. I told the group we need to check his throat to make sure he's not choking on his tongue, and thankfully his throat was cleared and he started to have some of an airway coming back. Soon after, the paramedics showed up, which felt like forever, but they did show up. I was still doing CPR, and as they were hooking him up to their machine, the AED told me to deliver a shock, and I asked the paramedic if she wanted me to do it, and she said yes, so one more shock I gave him. After that, they put him on the gurney and sent him off to the hospital. As this whole thing was happening, I did not panic. I relied on my training that I got from my school of April in 2019. The whole process came to me like naturally. I had no worries of what I was doing. I just kind of relied on what I was trained to do. For this, I believe that CPR and first aid should be mandatory in all secondary schools because there's no doubt in my mind that this could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And I believe that AEDs should be everywhere, in hospitals, obviously, in arenas, in here, because we don't know what could happen at any time. Thank you.
Wow. I'm so pleased to welcome both Rachel and Michelle to our meeting, providing us with this opportunity to formally acknowledge their heroic actions that saved a human life. Also joining us is Mr. George Padani. George, wait.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors, Gilles family, Michelle, Rachel, Padani family, EMS workers, firefighters, arena staff, everybody that was there. Um, I had a great Thanksgiving. I had a lot to be thankful for. What do you say to the person that saved your life? A big thank you for that. If it wasn't for Rachel, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be at both my daughters' weddings that are coming up. I'm just thankful for everybody that was involved and everything everybody did. And it's great that the arena had the defibrillators in a location where they were easily accessible. And thank you for that. Thank you.
We're so glad you're here tonight too, George.
Wanted me to give this to Rachel and invited Rachel to a viewing of a surgery that she'll be doing in the future.
Wow. I've been in this council chamber 20 years and I've never had anything like this happen in here. And I know there's staff members as well that have been here a long time or at other municipalities. So we're just so fortunate to have an evening like tonight. I have just a couple of other points and then I'm going to do some presentations from the town as well. Michelle observed exactly what she knew and responded very quickly. The families are all here tonight because of your great action. It's a situation such as this that validates the efforts we all put in to ensure our communities are safe and we have the tools needed to assist in the need. Council made the decision to put an AED in all of our municipal facilities, a decision that today proved to be the right one. The system is working. So I would like to come down and we have two Well, that's quite the way to start a council meeting, isn't it? It's really quite something, and very proud of our young people and our arena staff and our emergency services as well. Truly a team effort to save a life. And I'm so glad that we did decide to put the fibs into all of our facilities with that. So I am looking for a motion to receive. Be it resolved that council recognize R. Gilles and M. McCallen for their heroic efforts provided on September 15th, 2019 at the East Gwillimbury Sports Complex that saved a human life. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Brothers, Councillor Roy DiClemente. Okay. And have you something to add to this?
I had something to add to it. I was going to make it as a second resolution as I'm still drafting.
Okay, we'll go ahead and recognize this then. And any questions on the motion? All those in favor? And that's carried. And you would have a second motion to tie to this one?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it was somewhat of an inspiration from Ms. Gilles' speech where she gave credit to her training, and I'm 3/4 of the way there, but what I've got here is whereas Ms. Rachel Gilles gave credit to her training in CPR and first aid and giving her the confidence required to act quickly and save a life, and whereas she suggested that such training be mandatory in all secondary schools, be it therefore resolved that the Council of the Town of East Gwillimbury recommend to the local school boards and the Ministry of Education that such training be offered as part of a curriculum, just a change to the curriculum.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 3 is our proposed 2020 business plan and budget. Mr. Valcic. Excuse me, just before you start, we've already passed it, but while you're here, just before we move on to the next agenda item, we can read it back to you of what we passed. Mr. Clerk, would you have that?
I haven't sent it to him yet because I'm
Okay.
still typing it.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, just for Ms. Gilles' credit, what I just proposed was that I was inspired by your speech this evening, and what I drafted was I said, whereas as Ms. Rachel Gilles gave credit to her training in CPR and first aid and giving her the confidence required to act quickly and save a life, and whereas she suggested that such training be mandatory in all secondary schools, be it therefore resolved that the Council of the Town of East Gwillimbury recommend to the local school boards and the Ministry of Education that a change be made in offering this training as part of the curriculum. And it was passed.
It was passed unanimously. Okay. Thank you for your help. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With that, we'll turn our attention to the kickoff of the 2020 business plan and budget process. And I do want to start by first recognizing the senior finance team that's here with me tonight. So our Director of Finance and Deputy Treasurer, Warren Marshall, who's going to lead the majority of the presentation this evening after I provide some introductory comments and go through a few of the introductory slides. I also want to recognize Carolyn Brown, our Manager of Development Finance and Capital Planning, and Val Adema, our Manager of financial services and operations. And these folks, along with the extended management team, have done a tremendous amount of work over the past few months to bring us to this evening. And I think have, as usual, done a great job. In fact, probably done even a better job than last year, which I didn't think was possible last year, but I think they've done it. So this evening is really the kickoff to the public process of the budget. So although we've been busy with our sleeves rolled up for some time now, this is really the initial kickoff. And then it'll set the stage for, in the next couple of weeks, us issuing detailed budget books for your information. And then, as you know, our detailed deliberations begin towards the end of November. So we've got a good amount of time that we're looking to have you be able to go through that detail. And Mr. Marshall's going to certainly be extending invitations for all members of council to come and meet with us in advance of the deliberations, just to make sure the process is as effective and efficient for you as possible. So with that, as some introductory comments, I will probably need a little help with this. I don't.
Perhaps there'll be a new one in the budget.
Well, we're going to see if we can carve out a few dollars for a new clicker. So just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to discuss this evening. The 2019. We'll give you a little bit of an overview of 2019, where we are at as a municipality in terms of our fiscal position. 2020 budget components, and these will be very familiar to you. And for those watching through live streaming, there's really four major sections or components to our budget. One is our capital portion of the budget. We have an operations portion. We do try and break the operations portion into, now it's changing on its own, into base programs and services, our growth pressures, and service level enhancements for transparency. Working now? Okay, thank you. Great, will do. And then we have a development and fee supported portion of our budget, which is really the portion that is not funded by taxes, and then water and wastewater, which is funded through the water and wastewater rates. So first, just a little bit of a recap on how have we done in 2019 in terms of assessment. Certainly since 2016, Council will know that we've been very prudent in our planning for what new units will be coming on, what the revenues that will be coming on from those new units looks like, and more importantly, lining that up with the additional programs and services that are required to serve new residents as they move into our community. Currently, MPAC is processing new units onto the tax roll within 12 to 18 months, which is actually quite good. Traditionally, that could have been in the 24 to 36 month range, and we've worked very closely with them over the last few years, and we're quite pleased with the turnaround time that we're seeing. Our preliminary data would suggest that we're going to see some favorable assessment relative to what we were budgeting in 2019. That will obviously be confirmed through the year-end process, but that would be what we would expect to see. And we do see modest annual assessment growth projected for the near future. So if you go back to 2017, there was a fairly massive spike in building permit activity and growth in that year. And then we've seen that still continue in terms of the growth, but the acceleration of growth has slowed. So we're probably looking at somewhere between 200 and 250 units of growth in 2020 and for the next couple of years. And just for your information, you know that we typically make the assumption that each unit of growth represents about 3 new residents in terms of population. So in terms of what that correlation looks like. I'm delighted to say that, I think we've, as an organization between staff and council, done a great job in managing the finances of the organization. We continue to be in a solid financial position, which I think is great news. We continue to be debt-free. May not,
be something that will be achieved indefinitely if there's strategic opportunities where borrowing might in fact be advantageous for us to deal with strategic priorities of council. But to date, we've managed to stay debt-free, which I think puts us in a great position. We've been able to bring tax levy increases in roughly aligned with inflation for the base programs and services. We continue to have the lowest relative taxes in the region, and I'll show you that in just a couple of moments. And all of this happening while we're continuing to build reserves. So you can see that close to 75 million in available reserves between our development charges and our other reserves. And we've also been carving out some money along the way in anticipation of operating new facilities, our Health and Active Living Plaza and our Operations Center as we go, which will be some large new facilities that will be added to our inventory. This is just a little bit of history on what the average tax rate increases have been, and you can see the blue bars represent the tax levy increases. So the percentages are along the left side, the y-axis there, if you will. And so you can see that those we're sort of peaking in that 04 to 06 range, and then starting to come down, and they've really leveled off from 11 through to 19. In fact, in 19, the final inflation rates actually came in a little higher than our tax rate increase. So we're actually below. Not from our perspective, something you could do indefinitely, because your cost pressures typically are driven by at least inflation, and so we try and align, we think, is a responsible approach. We like to show this slide. It actually, the source of information is the BMA municipal study, and so it's an independent third-party study that's done based on financial information returns and other information that they use to compare municipalities across the province. And when we look at municipalities in York Region, what we see is, if we take, for example, a two-story detached home, and we compare it in each of the municipalities around the region, you can see that the, and I don't know if this has a pointer. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So you can see that East Gwillimbury's average taxes would be in around here, sort of around the $3,800 a year mark. And then the next lowest would be Georgina's. And the reason that we've put the percentages there is to indicate the percentage increase that you'd have to put through to taxes in East Gwillimbury to get to that, to be equal to the next lowest. So you could put through a 12% increase and you would come into line with the lowest amongst the rest of them in the region. So now part of that, in fairness, would be because there's some services that we don't yet have in place. So we're going to see that gap close a little bit as we put in things like a new aquatics facility and so on, which some of the others might already have in, and we don't yet. But still celebrating, very, very tight fiscal management and very, very responsible and modest tax rate increases. So when we start the budget process each year, one of the things that we like to do is set out, and you'll have seen these before. They haven't really changed much for the last handful of years because they've served us very well. But they're really the principles that and the objectives that we're trying to achieve in setting the budget, rather than it simply being a number crunching exercise. We are actually trying to set it in a way that it achieves a number of objectives. I spoke about number one, which is maintaining the base programs and services with tax levy increases in line with inflation. You can see we provide for growth-related service pressures through the new assessment that comes in. And we have multi-year funding plans that we've put in place when we're dealing with service level increases. Most notably, the building up of our emergency services area has been a large one. And we also are anticipating, I mentioned the aquatics facility is a good example of a new service that will be introduced when we hit the population threshold that enables us to operate that facility.
at committee today, there was a lot of discussion about modernization and about efficiency and effectiveness, and that is a long-standing objective, and we take that one very seriously to make sure that whatever we do have in our resource base in the budget, that it's being managed absolutely as efficiently and effectively as it can be, while still providing the quality programs that we know the residents expect. And asset management is something we continue to fund as well. The budget does also provide for cost of living adjustment as well as collective agreement obligations. And right now, those would be sitting in around the 2% mark or so. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'd like to just have the Director and Deputy Treasurer come up and walk you through some of the more specifics in terms of those components on the budget.
So the town's budget consists of 4 components, as you saw earlier. The 2020 proposed budget has our total request going in at $50.7 million. It's about $5 million more than 2019, and mainly due to the increase in the capital request. And since capital fluctuates year to year, it's fairly regular that you'll see that change. So in addition to the $50.7 million that is being requested in 2020, there are a number of projects, about $30 million in projects that have been previously approved that haven't been completed yet. And 2/3 of that amount is the operations center that's ongoing right now. As well, we have work that has been approved to enhance the Mount Albert Community Center and Queensville Parks to $2.7 million. And that's going on right now and anticipated to be completed in 2020. And the design and architectural services that are being conducted for the Health and Active Living Plaza. So those are some of the main ones that are ongoing right now. And our regular infrastructure maintenance, we have a program of about $1.2 million per year that we use to improve and maintain our roads infrastructure, and that's ongoing now as well. So in terms of capital, the capital budget mainly consists of one-time or time-constrained projects that eventually end up producing either producing, enhancing, or developing or acquiring a tangible capital asset. So it also includes studies that are usually also involving capital as well, but they're mainly specific in timeline and in expenditure. The proposed budget for 2020 for capital is almost $12 million. You'll see that about 50% of the program is to be funded from either tax-supported or rate-supported reserves. The balance is funded either from growth-related reserves or from grants and other types of funding that we receive. So this is a little different than in previous years, as we had been focusing on growth before, so the growth component was higher, but now since we are kind of slowing down with our growth, we're focusing more on the rehabilitation side. So some of the projects that are anticipated for 2020, I'm not going to go through the whole list, I'll just highlight a couple of them. So the Center Street revitalization, I think Council will recognize that, as we just received a notice of receipt of about $2.2 million in grant funding for this initiative. Excuse me. This is going to be a multi-year project, so there's about $590,000 included in the 2020 budget, and that'll be, the majority of it will be spent in the following years. The sports complex expansion. When the operations center becomes operational and we move out of our existing facility, this is a project to plan on how we're going to design the expansion to and use that additional land that has now become available. And that is approximately a $1.1 million project. As well, official plan review. It's required every 5 years, and that's an extensive exercise that we must undertake. And it's approximately $1.5 million in expenditure, and that's important for helping us to plan our next phase of growth. And as well, the stormwater master plan. This was recently, most recently done in 2012, so it's an update to that plan. And it continues the town's focus on asset management and planning for the future. And that is a $200,000 project. So as well as, in addition to those projects, there are capital needs that help the town continue and support their day-to-day operation. So in the proposed 2020 budget, there's about a half dozen vehicles and equipment that are being proposed budget. The repair and maintenance of infrastructure. I mentioned the road infrastructure and rehabilitation project that continual projects. I think there's about $1.3 million included in this round for 2020. And continuing on with the water meter replacement, this is year 3 of the 4-year plan. And in addition, the repairs and retrofit of the pumping station in Holland Landing, which is about 45 years old right now and is in need of some repair. So while I'm on the topic of capital, I think I should talk about Bill 108 and its potential impact on the town. So it received royal assent in June of this year, with some details, some key details missing out of it. So through the summer, the province came out with, developed a technical working committee to come and try to hammer out some of those details. So we haven't heard the results of that technical working group, but one of the impacts that it basically will have, and I hope I'm not oversimplifying it, is it takes some of our growth-related funding sources, combines them together into one pot, and puts a cap on it. So we don't know. One of the details that is missing is what's that cap. So it could impact the amount of funding that we have available for key infrastructure such as our library, our rec center, and parks. So the proposal from the province is to have that municipalities must enact this by January 2021. That still hasn't been finalized yet, but if it stays, we'll have to have these plans in place before that happens, or else we won't be able to collect those growth-related funding sources. So the impacts of that will most likely be reflected in the 2021 budget. The next part of our budget, and part of the budget that most people are interested in, is our operating budget. And that's the component of our budget that is supported mainly from taxes. The proposed operating budget for 2020 is almost $26 million. And as you can see here, the majority of that program is funded from taxation. There are some other sources of funding that help mitigate the full impact on the tax burden. For example, user fees, program fees, and some sales of, for example, green bins and things like that. But the majority of the program is funded through the tax levy. So the operating budget is categorized into 3 areas. First area is the base program, and that is to provide the same level of service to our existing residents and businesses. And that's usually funded through the existing tax base. So the existing residents and their tax. The next category would be the growth-related pressures, which is to provide the same level of service for the increased population. So for our growth that happens year to year, that these growth-related costs would help provide services to those individuals that are moving in. And that would be funded from the growth and assessment that we receive annually. And the final part to our to the operating budget is service level increases, and that's to provide an increased level of service to the whole population. And that's usually funded through taxes, and we at East Gwillimbury have provided for some dedicated taxes to help fund those, and I'll get into those a bit later. So for the growth-related pressures for this budget, there are a few here, and I can get into a bit of detail here for you. So the additional winter maintenance, that's to service our additional lane kilometers that we have experienced in the past couple of years. I believe there was a report to council that kind of outlined the requirement for additional funding to service that growth. Additional training and professional development, that not only is to help train the additional staffing that we have, not just the FTEs, but contract and part-time people and our paid-on-call firefighters. But it also addresses the feedback that we received from our employee engagement survey that was looking for additional opportunities for training and development. So this also helps address that. Additional facilities and programs, that's mainly the annex across the street, and it is to provide some additional customer service support at the sports complex. Increased library operations, that is a request for additional staffing to help with the increased subscription-based needs in the digital literacy section. As well, increased software licenses and maintenance. That is also to help support the additional staffing, the licenses. We need additional staffing if we need additional licenses for the additional staff. But it also helps as we have tried to become more efficient and use and leverage technology. It helps us deal with some of our transaction volume increases and increases in services that we have to provide, and it helps us become more efficient that way. And finally, the park operations. That's mainly materials, additional materials that we need to help service the additional parks that we've put into service. And those costs would be funded from our increased assessment that we are anticipating in 2020. So we're proposing the continuation of multi-year service plans to help fund specific service level increases that has been approved by council previously. So the community and safety, that has been a multi-year project funding program for several years, and that's to help increase the staffing complement and the level of excuse me, the level of service in that area. So we're proposing a 0.5% increase in both 2020 and 2021 and for those additional staff members. As well, what was introduced in last year's budget was a dedicated 0.5% for the operation of new facilities, and in specific the help as we are experiencing a service level increase as the town introduces its first pool in the area. There are also some some staffing requests included in the 2020 budget. And we've categorized this into its three service growth pressure areas. So the growth-related staffing requests, which I've briefly mentioned, the digital literacy specialist and recreation customer service representative, they would be funded out of the increased assessment that we received in 2020. The service level increase for the fire inspector, that's a dedicated 0.5%. That would help cover off the cost of that staffing member. And you'll notice in the base category, staff have done a really good job in minimizing the tax levy impact of the staffing request in this area. So what has happened is staff have either been able to find alternative revenue sources or reduction in costs in other areas to offset the cost of acquiring staff, or we've been able to switch the contract staffing costs or part-time staffing costs into the full-time staffing cost area to make it a very minimal impact to the tax levy base. So this is a summary of the total pressure on the operating budget. There's $2.5 million of expenditure pressure in the operation budget. And you'll see approximately $1.7 million of it of assessment growth is anticipated for 2020. So if you look at the last two lines in the funding here, these two here, that is really the pressure that is going to be experienced on the tax levy for 2020. So there's about $800,000 of tax levy pressure. $200,000 is for the dedicated increases on the multi-year funding plan, and $600,000 on our base. So this is a slide that most people are interested in. This the impact of the tax levy pressures on an average homeowner. So we're proposing a pressure on the base programs of 2.6%, which is about $41 to the average homeowner, plus the dedicated 0.5% for community safety and for the facilities, which is $8 each, which ends up being a total of approximately $57 on the average taxpayer. So one thing that I didn't mention in the previous slide is on the assessment side, we're still getting final numbers in so those numbers could be adjusted somewhat. We're not expecting big swings, but there's one run left. So there could be some either dollars lost or gained out of that last run. So in terms of the objectives that Mr. Valcic had mentioned earlier, we believe that we've brought in a budget that is aligned with inflation. So inflation over the past few months has run anywhere between 1.9 and 2.6%. When we drafted the budget, the inflation rate was 2.6%. So the latest inflation rates actually come out tomorrow. So we're a bit late, a bit early on that, but we still believe we're in line with inflation. We've shown that we have provided for growth-related pressures through the assessment increase, and we have proposed keeping with our multi-year plans for mitigating tax levy pressures for community safety and community health and recreation. There are projects in the budget, technology-based, that also focus on optimizing our efficiency and effectiveness. And we continue to do that as an organization as we go through our budget process and our annual operations. For asset management, in 2019, there was some money built into the the budget for asset management, and we're proposing that that continues on. And we have provided for the cost of living and collective agreement obligations. And in addition, we are proposing that there be a market assessment done for our salaries and our jobs in 2020, and that has also been built into this budget as well. So the next part of our budget is the development and fee-supported budget, and that portion of the budget has no tax levy support whatsoever. It's basically depends on the fees that are generated from application. And we use the reserve to balance off years where we have positive inflows, where revenues exceed our expenditures, and it offsets years where we need draws from the reserve. So this year you'll find that it has been a slower year, and there'll be a greater need for draws from the reserve. So the last part of the budget is the water and wastewater budget, and that is funded from water and sewer user, water and sewer user rates. And we tried to ensure that the rates are set to ensure that we have full cost recovery from our operations. So full cost recovery means not only operating our day-to-day operations, but providing enough funds for the eventual repair and replacement of our assets. So regarding that, the town is required every 5 years to prepare a financial plan that shows that the town is operating a system that is financially sustainable. So we are due for our update in 2020. So you'll see a capital project in our program to help assist with the development of the water and wastewater study and generate proposed new rates. And we're proposing that we table this budget in January 2020. So next steps, as Mr. Valcic had said, we've been working on this for a while. We actually started in the beginning of July and working on this budget. So we're happy to bring the budget to this point in time. Our next steps are we have 3 days of deliberation set up, starting on the 25th and ending on the 2nd. We also, if necessary, we have available a special council time slot in between. We're proposing that the operating budget gets adopted by council on December 17th, and then in January we would start our water and wastewater review process. So with that, if any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. I'm surprised it was just since July. There's a lot of material there to cover. Thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Crothers.
Thank you. On page 19 of the agenda, you spoke about Nikita Trail paving. Is that the lot or is that the parking lot? The parking lot. Thank you. That's what I thought. I just saw it. I double checked that. I wanted to get a better sense, and you've touched on this in your presentation, that about our growth-related service pressures. We know that as we get more homes, there's more roads to plow and there's more libraries that are needed, et cetera. We know that our development charges pay for the capital, but going forward, it's the tax base that pays for the ongoing services. So I wanted to get an understanding of how much our tax base has increased over last year, so we can get an idea of how much our budget needs to increase in each of these areas to keep up with the growth in town.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So our assessment growth in 2019 is approximately 7%. So those numbers are still being finalized, but right now it stands at approximately 7%.
Okay.
So that's just a change from year to year. So previously we've experienced like 10% assessment increases.
Okay, so basically, if all else stayed equal, our budget would increase by 7% to cover the costs of the new houses, sort of in a general. Yeah, okay, thank you. And just one more question on the, actually more of a comment than a question on the water and wastewater. We mentioned this last year, and I'd just like to get in early before the budget's actually brought to us to look for financial incentives for conservation. How we can encourage our residents to keep their water bills low by giving them some sort of incentive or, a discount on a low flush toilet, that sort of thing. See on social media a lot of people complaining about their water bills, and I know that our costs are balanced, what we have to pay for the water. So it'd be nice if we could offer them some way to help bring those costs down for them. Thank you.
Any other questions? They're saving them all for budget days, I can tell. We're usually here pretty much a full day for those 3 days, and we should have all the answers by the time we get there. In the meantime, this gives us an opportunity to really absorb a lot of the changes that are made, and there are some changes from previous years that we're going to have to address that have not been in front of us in the past. So with that, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. More of a housekeeping question more than anything else. Just wondering when the binders would be released to us, because I'd like some time between now and the 25th of November to review them so that we can be as give as best feedback as we can and be as prepared as possible. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We're planning on getting the budget books out before the end of the month. And so you'll have a few weeks to look at it, and then we'll be setting up meetings with you to go over your questions.
I'm not seeing any other questions. With that, could I have a move to receive Councillor Persicini and Councillor Roy Clemente? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall. I know your work is just beginning. I know you're busy all year, but this is particularly a long-term haul until we get this approved and move forward. So we appreciate your diligence in this. We are at item D for deputations, and Mr. Clerk, could you introduce our deputant, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The deputant is Ram Millar of the Rodeo Management Group. He's making a deputation. It's in correspondence with item G2, again from Mr. Millar himself, asking for the municipality to deem the Ram Rodeo Championship, which is taking place this weekend, as an event of municipal significance.
Welcome, Mr. Miller. You know more about budgets now than you probably ever have before, just the positioning of where you landed in our agenda tonight.
I have
So
a few questions on your budget. No, I'm just kidding.
welcome and good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm here because obviously we're doing our ninth annual championship rodeo at the Royal Canadian Riding Academy. It's actually coming up this weekend, and we have done it for 9 years. We're very proud of it. We're anticipating an extremely sold out show. Last year we were sold out on Saturday, Sunday, and currently we're up about 70% in our ticket sales. So we're thinking it should be a well attended event. I'm really here tonight for my, I had to apply for an SOP and I needed a letter of municipal significance. And we do this in many towns, but I didn't understand your new format because I obviously missed the one meeting, so I had to come to this one. And I hope you can appreciate the events Friday night. So we're hoping we could get a decision whether we can certainly get the letter. I've talked to the SOP people, the gaming and lottery commissions. They've assured me that we are in line with everything, and as long as I can get the letter by tomorrow morning within 45 minutes, they'll have it approved, and that they had no no further questions, but we have a long-running relationship with them, and we've done many events with them.
How many people would be participating? I would assume spectators, but you also have participants as well.
So we have a tour that goes throughout the eastern parts here in Ontario, and we have about 650 competitors that compete with us. And they come from Ontario, Quebec, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, through there. And at this finals for the championship, the top 10 come in each. So there's basically about 90 competitors. And then as spectators that are coming, the Royal Riding Academy holds around 1,700 people, and we would anticipate that we should be full for each show now.
Very good.
And sorry, maybe I could say, the idea with having a bar, we do have it. It's our championship. They do have a licensed establishment they've had upstairs for years, which we've always used. And this year they don't have a vendor there or somebody in place, so we had to take it upon ourselves to do it. We have responsible people and a company that comes that are all smart served and so forth. But the bar is not really anticipated for the people that are sitting in the bleachers as much as the competitors. They're camped there for the weekend, and it's kind of their last weekend. And so in the evenings afterwards, they go up and have a drink. And we do responsibly. We close at midnight. We do that out of responsibility. We also do it because we're getting a little bit older and we don't want to be up quite that late. And they're all competing the next morning. So it's not like there's about $60,000 in prize money. So, and they are athletes and they have to be prepared to compete. So it's not the old days of the 1,700 person dance. And we don't do that. And as I say, in 9 years, we've never had any type of citation or any type of a problem in any way. And we're proud of that.
Thank you. Councillor Persichini.
How many people actually stay at East Gwillimbury, sleep and spend money and all that stuff?
Well, I know that I'm getting complaints every day that nobody can find hotels at the moment. It seems everything is booked up, and it's, that's wonderful, but it is a big concern. We've been sending a lot of people now over to Markham in the last week just because we can't get a room up here anymore, and they're booked. So we like to think they're booked with some of our people, I would assume, because I think about 80% of the spectators that come live outside of this region. So for tourism, I believe I know our tourism report last year said we generated over $14 million on economic impact. And that's not my numbers. That's coming from Ontario Tourism. So
If this goes, can you give us a report back to us to give us an idea, the money raised and how many people participated, where they're coming from, to get an idea, if this should be carried on or not?
absolutely. We do an economic impact every year with Tourism Ontario. So I've got all those facts. I'd be happy to submit it. I'd be proud to submit it to you.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your presentation today. I was wondering if you could take us through, let us learn a little bit more about your rodeo. What are the lineup of events that you folks have?
So I've been producing rodeos for over 22 years, and our rodeo format has changed, and it's changed because our demographics have changed and what people understand and their form of entertainment. But we have the basic events of rodeo. We do not have any roping events. We don't have team roping, tie down, and calf roping, and so forth. We've taken that all out of our shows. And that was a big decision because I am a roper. My family is a roper, professional ropers, but I'm in the entertainment business. And for the entertainment model, we've substituted with pole bending, which is ladies racing their horses in a slalom course. Barrel racing is extremely large. We have the youth component where they also pole bend and barrel race. And we also have the bucking bulls and the bucking horses. And then we also have trick riders and trick ropers and more entertainment package. And maybe I could say, in case somebody's questioning it, we have an absolutely 100% open book policy with the Ontario SPCA. We've had it for 22 years. We invite the inspectors out. We also do clinics for the inspectors so that when they show up at our event, they understand what a rodeo consists of And I believe that we in Ontario are leading in North America for changing the environment of rodeo and doing different things. And it's witnessed by the fact that we're taking some events out and changing and putting other events in that I think are a little more appealing to the crowd.
Councillor Crone.
Yeah, I think you anticipated my question. You know,
Yes.
certainly animal cruelty is something that a number of us on this side of the table take very seriously.
So do I.
So, yeah, you know, obviously we don't want to be lending our seal of approval if something is untoward, especially when it comes to animals. You mentioned that you take every effort to make sure that they're protected and safe. Is this my daughter rides English and Western, so she's been getting into Western lately. And I know about the barrel racing and the pole bending. It's not feats of strength or anything like that. It's just going through poles. Is there anything that's going on in your rodeo that would be any different than happens at the Royal Winter Fair?
We produce a Royal Winter Fair, and I've been doing the Royal Winter Fair for 15 years. And to be quite honest about it, it's a great, successful rodeo. And I took what we do at the Royal because we didn't do the roping down there. And I simply looked at it and said, you know what? It's a very entertaining package. I don't need people do question roping. And a lot of them, I will say, do it out of naivety. And that's okay. I mean, once we explain, and we had 9 animal rights people that were standing in front of our place here in Newmarket 3 years ago. And I invited them in early in the morning. I asked them to come in and please see what we were doing, of which only 2 of them came. The others didn't want to see it. But when I experience that type of situation, I always invite them in. I show them everything we do. I give them an open forum to come behind and we explain it. And I was very proud that the 2 people that I took an hour and a half and did that with early in the morning both went home and decided. And as I said, Ross, we agree your animals are very well looked after. Your welfare, your animals are great. And their question was the animal rights issue. Do they have the right to stay home if they want to? And, you know, I think we'll always have a difference of opinion. The one thing I know is every weekend when I get my bucking horses and I back the trailer up, they all get in and they know exactly where they're going and they're very proud and I'm proud of them. And you can spend $200,000 on a bucking horse these days. So in my world, $200,000 would be a lot and I'd look after it very much. And I always say my wife, if I could come back as my wife's barrel racing horse in my next life, I'd have a great life.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Crothers.
I don't have questions on receiving this report, but I do have questions on G2 when we come to whether or not we're going to declare a municipally significant event. I just want to make sure that I can wait till then to raise my questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Could I just, if I can add one thing, for 9 years I was in charge of animal welfare for the Ontario Equestrian Federation. I also sat on Equine Canada's board for 6 years on the animal welfare committee as well. So I sat there, I was there because I cared about it.
Thank you. Okay, could I have a motion to receive the deputation, please? Councillor Persichini and Councillor Foster, all those in favor, and that's carried. So if you'll just wait a few moments, we'll move to the next part of our agenda and deal with the second piece of it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
In closing, we would, when I go to a town, because we are very proud we make it a municipal event, we do normally invite the mayor and the council people, a lot of the MPs, and at the start of the show, if anybody was able to come to represent the town, we'd love to have you there and invite you into the middle of the arena. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are at item E, and that's committee recommendations. And I have a mover and seconder to for the meeting held on October 1st. Councillor Persichini, Councillor Crothers, all those in favor. Go ahead. Question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, we have a memo from staff relating to RICO number 250, relating to the Queensville Phase 5 LPAT. I would prefer, just from a procedural perspective, to have that set aside until we've actually considered the report from staff. So if there's any questions that come up, I don't foresee any problems, but it just seems odd to be ratifying something before we've dealt with the additional information. So I just hoping we could pull that one.
With
Please.
the census of staff, or of council, if I'm seeing some nods here, we'll just hold that one off until we get to the other part. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Item F, adoption of the minutes, and the first one is, oh, sorry. I did have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? That's carried. Pardon me, go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, that you do have one recommendation from earlier today. We'll put it up on the screen for you. And it was with regards to the Hall Landing Community Group and reaching out to
Yes.
local businesses.
Yes.
Please and thank you.
They want to get going.
Correct. A mover and a seconder for that.
Moved by Councillor Crothers, seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay. Number 1, adoption of our minutes. And that's from October 1st. Moved by Councillor Roy de Clemente, seconded by Councillor Morton. All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 2, adoption of the council minutes from the meeting held on October 1st. That's pages 46 to 55. Any questions on those? By Councillor Persicini, seconded by Councillor Crone. All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 3, the adoption of council minutes for our special meeting held on October the 8th. That's pages 56 to 58. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Foster. Councillor Crothers. All those in favor? And that's carried. And we have correspondence for consideration. And the first one is from Mr. Freeman, Chief Planner, from D. Bosso, Commissioner of Corporate Services, and E. Mahoney from Commissioner of the Environmental Services Regional Municipality of York. It's pages 59 to 74. Are there any questions? Is that a question? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. In this report, it talks about increased allocation, and it also talks about the capacity of the lagoons. And I was just wondering when and where we have conversation about what we do with that capacity, because I know there would be many residents who would want that extra capacity used to drain at least a few of those lagoons. So I'm wondering if we can get an idea of when we decide where that capacity would go.
Mr. Valcic?
Madam Mayor, I'll just start, and then Mr. Ramuno may provide some additional comments. But that additional capacity would be determined based on recommendations from staff, but would ultimately be determined by council in terms of what to do with that allocation. That would be brought forward to you at some point in the coming months, based on plans that we would envision coming forward for additional growth in the town. I do want to point out, and Mr. Ramuno may want to expand on this, if you look into that report, it not only indicates the additional allocation of roughly 700 units, which is about 2,700, population. But it also speaks to a regional reserve, which is it indicates about 4,000 population, which would be roughly in the neighborhood of 1,300 units, which seems to indicate that that's reserved for the Holland Landing Sewage Lagoon capacity. So I think there's both provided for in that regional report. And Mr. Ramuno may wish to expand on that.
I'm sorry, just before you speak, if I may, I don't quite understand what you're saying. So the reserve is reserve in the pipe to drain the lagoons? So is that what you're saying? That there's room in the pipe right now?
Madam Mayor, through you, if you look at the correspondence, and I'm just going to try and pull up the exact page reference.
I think it's page 73 of the agenda.
Just see where that number is I'm referring to. If you look at attachment 2, and perhaps the clerks, just past it. So the clerks have just put that up on the screen. If you see towards the bottom of that schedule, it talks about All Landing Lagoons Reserve, 4148 population. That is a regional reserve that they're suggesting exists within their servicing capacity that is above and beyond the 700 units. So Mr. Ramuno may wish to provide additional comments in that regard.
So you, Madam Mayor, the only thing I'll add, apart from the that 4148 persons equivalent assigned to the Hall Landing lagoons, that reserve, earlier on in the report in Table 2, the additional servicing capacity assignment that the region handed out to the local municipalities, and that occurred back in June of 2018. East Gwillimbury got the equivalent of 2,727 persons equivalent. So it's roughly about 800 or 900 units, depending on the unit types. So that's the additional capacity that has been assigned to the town, and I'll be preparing a report over the next couple months. And it's an update to the servicing allocation policy that council may have seen years past. So we'll update that and include the additional 2727 persons equivalent.
Mr. Romano, could you give us a rough idea of when that report would come back to us? I think we're looking for greater detail than we see here now, and nothing's going to change in the next week or two, but perhaps if we could have an understanding of when you maybe come back and shed a little more light on the whole issue.
Certainly, Madam Mayor, I think we can have the report in front of council probably during if not the last meeting in November, the December cycle. We're just getting a handle on the remaining allocation that we have left, in addition to this additional allotment that the region provided us last year. So I think definitely before the end of the year.
I'm still a little bit unclear, and I'm glad it's going to come back. So the question I'm looking for is, does that number, that line that you've highlighted in the report, indicate that there is space in the YDSS for the lagoons to drain into? And then the second question, if that is the case, is there infrastructure in place that would be able to make that happen? And I'm fine to wait for the full report on that. But that's what I'm hearing from you, and I just want to get confirmation on that. Thank you so much.
Exactly, and then we can have a full discussion at that time. Thank you. Any other questions? Do we have a motion to receive? Will you? Thank you. Councillor Roy DeClemente and Councillor Crone. All those in favor, and that's carried. Item number 2 is Mr. Millar, who has presented to us this evening, and this is in regard to the need to have an event of municipal significance. I guess it's a certificate, would it be? We've had these for other events. This isn't just you, but we've had them in the past. So I'll just refresh everyone's memory that that's what. And it's regarding the special occasion permit itself. Okay. Councillor Persicini.
I'll move it. It's okay with me.
You'll move it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, because it certainly helps to know that there's no roping going on, although many people have issues with the bucking and what it does to the animals, the fear that it instills in them. And as you touched on, they are unwilling participants. I think it's important. We spoke earlier about evidence-based decision-making, and I've spoken to this issue before about the effect of rodeos on children. And it's time for that we recognize that changing public attitudes. In 2015, 63% of Canadians were opposed to rodeos. And I'm not looking to shut it down or anything like that, but I'm just, in Councillor Crone's words, if we're giving this the seal of approval, I think we need to think about our residents and what the expectation is. We have hanging on our wall here, compassion as one of our key virtues. Our residents reach out to us all the time about compassion for animals such as tethered dogs, or the issue that we had with the animals on that property during the summer that raised a lot of concerns about animal welfare. We have correspondence coming up later in the agenda about the SPCA, about municipal bylaws regarding animal welfare. And I think that to declare this a municipally significant event sends a very different message than what we're talking about when we're talking about animal welfare. We're talking about compassion. I've looked at the pictures on the Facebook page. I've seen the look on those animals' eyes. They're not doing what they enjoy. And I know that this event is protested in our community regularly, annually. And I don't think that it's something that we should consider a municipally significant event, given the controversy around rodeos, not just here, but across Canada, including the Calgary Stampede. It's a growing concern. I know some people would say it's a tradition, but we've had in our past traditions of wearing fur coats. That's no longer acceptable in society. And I think rodeos are starting to go that way. And I applaud you for taking some of the more hurtful events out, but I cannot agree to endorse this as a municipally significant event, considering the controversies around rodeos. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Morton? Oh, you're going to second the motion? No other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciated. Okay. Item number 3 is correspondence from a resident on Leslie Street. And there is no address, there's no name, and a concern about tethered dogs on their property. Any questions on this? Any comments? Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Persicini, seconded by Councillor Roy DiClemente. All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 4 is correspondence from D. Vaillancourt, Chief Humane Programs and Community Outreach from the SPCA. And that correspondence be forwarded to our staff for consideration. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Go ahead, please.
I'm happy to move it. It seemed actually somewhat apropos that we've got these two pieces of correspondence together, and I think it's covered by the resolution that we've just passed with respect to directing staff to prepare a report. I just wanted to comment that while this piece of correspondence simply says, oh, well, it's quite easy, you could cover off some of the gaps by simply amending your bylaws, but from an operational perspective and a staffing perspective, there's a significant impact to our operating budget and to our staffing levels on the bylaws side. And I just wanted to be mindful of that it's not just as easy as simply amending your bylaws in order to be able to cover off the gaps that the province has created. So just my comment for this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Crothers.
I agree with that. I think this is another one of those bylaws that we need extensive deep dive into. Not only is there changes at the provincial level, but we just had the rodeo before us, and one of the points I had meant to make was that rodeos are actually exempt from animal cruelty laws. So when they say that they've had no problems because there is no laws, it's up to municipality to pass any animal cruelty laws. So if we want to see them continue to not have the animal roping, we need to put it in a bylaw. So I think that there's a lot to this bylaw, and I'm hoping that we can take a really deep dive into it, excuse me, and make sure that our animals that live, work, and play in EG are shown the compassion they deserve. Thanks.
Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? You made that motion, seconder. Councillor Crothers, all those in favor, and that's carried. We are at item H, and we have two reports. One is Joint Development Services and Community Parks Recreation regarding the Queensville Property Development Corp. Phase 5. Mr. Romino, are you prepared to speak to that?
Certainly. Thank you,
you.
Madam Mayor. So this is a follow-up report from the report that was presented to the Committee of Whole on October 1st in response to some questions with respect to the engagement with the ratepayers, the Grant Mill Leslie Neighborhood Association. I mentioned in the report that as of October 3rd, they were in agreement and satisfied with the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw. I'm pleased to report that as of October 10th, the Ratepayers Association have withdrawn their objections, and they've submitted a letter down to an agreement down to the LPAT, stating that they no longer have any concerns with the proposed development. So some of the issues that were addressed were developing group, G Group has agreed to provide some fencing, and the Ratepayers Association is satisfied with the lotting, specifically the 50-foot proposed lots that have been that back onto the to their existing development. They are aware that the two-story homes could be built, and the zoning bylaw will provide for a maximum building height of 11 meters for those for that zone. In addition, and I can turn this over to Aaron, we've reported on the parkland requirements that have been provided for within this plan, as well as the previous phases and the the proposed trail connectivity throughout the various phases of the Queensville development.
Questions? I'm not seeing any. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to hear that the adjacent residents have had their concerns addressed. I did want to just voice a little bit of concern about building heights, and I understand that it's consistent with our zoning bylaw. And my worry here is that an 11-meter high house is about 36 feet tall, and many of the houses adjacent just to the north, or some of them are older split-level bungalows, and so there is the chance that it might not mesh as nicely as we might like. And I wanted to, for future applications, I'd like to find a way to ensure that we're while I know elevations are different in this, and the memo does speak to that. Just for future applications, I'd like to have a bit more mindfulness to existing or established neighborhoods and the kinds of inventory that the development community is bringing to adjacent lotting, just as a matter of future consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Crone, Councillor Persicini, all those in favor, and that's carried. Next one. Rico 250 from earlier.
Madam Mayor, we'll put it up on the screen for you.
Could you read it, please? Thank you.
Be resolved that Joint Development Services and Legal Council Support Services Report 2019-43 dated October 1st, 2019 regarding the LPAT appeal for the Queensville Phase 5 subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications files 19T-17001, ZBA 17.01, PL 171433 be received. The council authorize staff to appear at the local planning appeal tribunal, LPAD, proceedings in support of the town position on this matter, and the staff be directed to negotiate a settlement offer for the proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute minutes of settlement, including any ancillary documents required to give effect to the settlement and to the draft plan of subdivision zoning bylaw appeals, and that council directs staff to bring back further information regarding the building height and zoning engagement with the Neighborhood Association Trails Act Transportation Community Amenities, which I believe was the report just reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. When we reference that including any ancillary documents, I know there's been some discussion with a couple of the local residents regarding architectural control guidelines and some of the provisions. Would that be included as part of that, or do we need to make a separate reference to the architectural control guidelines in this resolution?
To you, Madam Mayor, that would be covered off. A good question. That would be covered off in the previous point with respect to staff is preparing the draft plan of subdivision conditions of approval and the implementing zoning bylaw. So the conditions of approval will include, and it's a standard requirement, that the developer would have to prepare urban design and architectural control guidelines as a condition prior to registration of the plan. Any construction proceedings. So we would then deal with the house designs through that process. So that is covered off as a condition of approval.
So for some of the adjacent residents who are concerned about corner lots and building profiles, that would be covered off.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. You moved. I didn't, but I think we, Mr. Clerk, did we already have is there a mover and seconder for this?
No, we do not have a
No.
mover and
Okay.
seconder through you, Madam Mayor.
I'm fine to
for
move it, and
the
I'd like a
reco.
recorded
Thank
vote,
you.
please.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Persuccini, and a recorded vote has been requested.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Rodeo Clemente is requesting a recorded vote on CWC recommendation 2019-250, previously read out. Councillor Rodeo Clemente, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Crothers, how do you vote? Councillor Crone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Foster, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Haxton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Morton, how do you vote? Yes. And Councillor Persuccini, how do you vote?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, H2, Development Services Planning Branch, Park Control, Exemption Bylaw, 12 Stones Home. Mr. Ramuno?
Madam Mayor, yes, this is just another part law control bylaw for the division of a one lot for the creation of 2 semi-detached units.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Morton, Councillor Foster. All those in favor? And that's carried. There are no other reports at this time. I'm down to resolutions, and there are no resolutions. I have 4 bylaws. Go through them individually. The first one is a bylaw to exempt certain lands, part lot control provisions of the Planning Act pertaining to portion of those lands of Oxford Plan, Subdivision 19T 13001, Phase 1, Lot 115, Plan 65M 4586. And that's the 12 stones that was just in our report above. Any questions? I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Persuccini, Councillor Foster. All those in favor? That's carried. The next one is a bylaw, being a bylaw to appoint a municipal law enforcement officer for the corporation town of East Gwillimbury for the purpose of enforcing fireworks bylaws and bylaws related to setting of fires. I just have one question. Is this a new position, or is this an existing position that the terms of reference have changed? Go ahead, please.
Thank you for that question. There are two things being accomplished here. Number one, for the first two are some housekeeping to ensure that the municipal bylaw matches what we've been relying on, and that being the Fire Prevention and Protection Act as far as delegation of authority. The second piece there is not a new position, but a contract position, which has been very recently secured to backfill for a LTD. And so that's not a new position, but a temporary fill-in, so we can carry out the business that's required. And of course, that new person to the corporation requires a bylaw to carry out their MLEO duties.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Persichini, all those in favor? That's carried. Bylaw number 3 is a bylaw to appoint a municipal law enforcement officer for the corporation for the purpose of enforcing. Sounds very similar to number 2, doesn't it? Okay, yep. Okay, 2 different people.
So we're talking about 3 people here. 2 of them are existing staff,
Yes.
and 1 is the contract intern position
Okay.
that I just spoke about.
So that would be number 3 and 4 then.
Correct.
I'll do them together then. Yes. Okay. Any questions? I have a mover and a seconder, please.
Just a point of clarification. My understanding is we've got a be it resolved that bylaws 120, 122, 123, and 124. Is that our resolution that we just did? I think we just voted on
Or we
J1, but I
yes,
think
we
when we did
voted
it, all of
on
them.
1 and 2, and we have 3 and 4 to do now.
My understanding is that with the resolution that was presented in our agenda, under item number 4, there's a resolution that blends them all together.
Yes.
So I thought that's what we had done.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Okay, then we're completed. Is that how you understand it, Mr. Clerk?
It's not exactly how we recorded it, but we can certainly make it that way, yes.
Well,
It's recommended that we typically pass all the bylaws at one time, but you started on the path of individually
yes.
asking recommendation, but we can certainly backtrack it if that is the consensus of council.
I'm seeing nods, but I'm not sure what you're nodding for. Okay. Okay. One motion moved by Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Persichini. All those in favor? That's carried. My error, I got going on the first 2 before I turned the page. Okay. Item K, there is no other business at this time. Is that correct? Thank you. And a confirming bylaw at this time, moved by Councillor Morton, seconded by Councillor Crothers. All those in favor? That's carried. And an adjournment at 8:38, moved by Councillor Roy DiClemente, seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.